a humble brag just to break the ice. But thank you so much for being here this morning. Michelle and I have a great presentation for you to talk about what these words mean and what does it look like now in the age of social media. All right, so cancel culture, civil discourse. What the meaning behind these words is going to be talked about with these objectives. We're going to define and explore what is active listening, what is empathy, but more importantly, what are these two words of cancel culture and civil discourse? But we're also going to go into, if you know the name Stephen Covey, brilliant man who had a book about these 7 habits for effective people. One of his habits, seek first to understand, then be understood, is habit 5. And that's another area we're going to go into because that habit is the most important when it comes to when we have conversations where we may not see eye to eye with. So let's just travel back to 2003 when the Facebook came out. You know, it was something that was pretty fun because you could find ways to make connections with people in an online environment. And so for someone at the time who was introverted like me, you know, I could log into Facebook and see all these different people that I may have knew that I worked with at intramurals or in class. And so you started to create this social network, which also lent this hand to digital currency. And so once Facebook started showing the number of friends you have, the different networks you belong to, you started to have this sense of, man, like I'm pretty big stuff on here. I like having this. And then Lord and behold, Facebook created the post where you could say what you're doing, what you're listening to, and then it started getting into this area of posting, oversharing information as well. So from 2002 to 3 to now, technology has advanced a lot. The cell phone controls so much of what we do when it comes to our calendar, when it comes to our emails, when it comes to pictures, cloud storage. The cell phone has done so much that it's created jobs in social media. Marketing has evolved. Business plans have evolved as well. Now that you have cell phones, what happened to the payphone? What happened to the telephone? So as technology advanced, the communication that we have between us as people, unplugged and offline, has diminished. We don't know how to have a conversation anymore with people who, I wouldn't say that have to agree with us, but the understanding of perspectives, understanding people's backgrounds, their story, it's all being lost in this combative arena that is social media. Because of social media, though, social media has influenced, has sparked movements that we've seen the past 3 to 4 years that were intensified this past summer. Because of social media, we now find truths and see truths that impact us, that impact our colleagues, our family, our friends. But because of social media, we also start to see the ugliness of people's thoughts, their opinions, because now everyone has an audience. And within that audience comes this whole boomerang back to social currency, digital currency. So from a participant standpoint as an individual, what's the motivation behind posting this information? Am I trying to spark a riot online, or am I trying to actually have a conversation? But what gets lost in all of the social media angst is the movement of things that have happened these past 2 or 3 years. The hashtag movement, Me Too, Time's Up, Black Lives Matter. And on the flip side, the QAnon, MAGA, the Proud Boys. And so now the social media is this arena of you can just say whatever you want to say with no repercussion. But when you try to have that same communication style offline, we struggle. We don't know how to have a conversation anymore. But more importantly, how are we telling and talking to our students about this being a developmental quality you got to have as far as breaking down what interpersonal communication looks like? And if they try to text talk or talk like they tweet, it's not going to work. So what exactly is civil discourse? It's pretty simple. It's an engagement through conversation intended to enhance understanding. Notice that it doesn't say, well, going back to Stephen Covey, seek first to understand, then be understood. Stephen Covey doesn't say seek first to be right, then be petty. Now, sometimes I could live by that moniker, but but that's the whole point of civil discourse is, hey, let's have a conversation. You said something on Facebook that I just want to follow up with, not something where I'm not calling you out, but I just want to better understand your thoughts behind it. I'm just interested just to knowing. Now, that is a more deliverable invitation to a conversation because my energy that I bring to that conversation is open, it's receptive. I'm not saying, look, what you said on Facebook was wrong, and here's why. So that's Facebook talk, that's reply talk, that's retweeting. So that doesn't work offline. You don't have a delete button when you have an actual conversation like this online. So this is where Michelle and I are going to go into as far as how do you advocate now? Because it's easy to tweet, retweet, and say you're all about this, but what are you doing offline? Because offline is where the real work happens.
So like Jonathan said, social media has created so many opportunities for communication, but it has also created some ugliness. And so we kind of see that pop up with cancel culture. So if you look on the screen, there's quite a few tweets that we've pulled that refer to cancel culture. Just as a quick poll, and I can't see most of you, but raise your hand if you've ever seen something like this, engaged in something like this, heard someone just make a joke that person's canceled before. Just a quick hand raise of who's engaged or seen these things. Yeah. So pretty much most of us have at least seen it, heard about it, maybe on the news, something. I know that I've made a joke about, oh, this person's canceled. I've heard students make those kind of jokes in real life. And so this is part of our vocabulary now, outside of social media, this whole canceling. And so it's because we get swept away. And I'm sure we've all had conversations about social media, about the anonymity of it, about the distance, about being able to be behind a keyboard before. So we won't go in great depth about that, but it allows us to say what we want to say with less inhibitions behind it. And so I found recently, though, talking with students that they actually do know when to not say something or when to not retweet something. Students are getting more and more comfortable and knowledgeable about social media just because this is what they're used to and this is how they communicate on a daily basis. The reason that I think it's become so important recently is just because of the pandemic. You know, it's one of our main ways to communicate now, main ways to get entertainment. We can just scroll all day because we're at home. And so it becomes even more important. You can see this with the past debates, the presidential debates. You probably all saw Twitter, Facebook light up with tons of comments, tons of probably memes and jokes too, after both of the debates. And so, you know, that also brings up the idea that if we're getting all of our information from just those comments or those tweets or those jokes, what kind of information are we really getting? What comes along with this is like what Jonathan mentioned, fighting on social media. It becomes really easy because maybe we don't have the opportunity to have those face-to-face discussions with people because we just don't see them anymore. And so it's gotten easier and easier to just, let's fight about it on Facebook. And then maybe regret it afterwards, but we were just so fired up in the moment that we just fell into it. So Jonathan, if you want to go to the next slide. So just like with politics and our world being polarized right now, there's also a debate and a conversation just around the concept of cancel culture. And it's definitely on a spectrum. We've got on one side, and you can see this played out within the tweets that I've pulled here, but you can see this played out as some people believing, you know, there's this body of thought, it's stifling rights, you know, it's stifling my First Amendment, free speech, having open dialogue, education, which is supposed to be a place where you can have those differing opinions. And then on the other side, you have the idea that, well, actually, this is just people getting the consequences for inappropriate or unacceptable actions that they have partaken in. And so there's those two sides, and there's also, so many different opinions in the middle. So you've got it's stifling my rights, and it's actually just consequences. And then somewhere in the middle, you've got, well, cancel culture doesn't allow us to continue to educate and have people grow and learn. So with that in mind, within the chat, if you'll just kind of put in some of your thoughts on where maybe you lie on this spectrum, maybe different circumstances that you think about when it comes to this spectrum of cancel culture. And we'll give you a couple minutes to get your thoughts into the chat. Okay, great. So I'm going to start just kind of reading off some of the opinions that are popping up into the chat. So I think to some degree it's about holding accountability, but I see the damaging effects of some censorship as well. Definitely that spectrum. Someone said it depends on the circumstance. Definitely would have to agree on that. Let's see. Someone says, I go back and forth. I think cancel culture is labeled into a lot of situations and just as a label. I totally agree that most people only want to be heard, but never want to listen. Yes, I think that probably we all have gone into a situation feeling that way or wanting to just talk and not listen. I don't like the idea of cancel culture because of the learning opportunities. I'm hoping everyone has friends that are willing to hold them accountable, most definitely. That's a big part of this, is holding each other accountable and being able to call people in. Holding offenders accountable, but sometimes takes away the opportunity for education and reform. Absolutely. Let's see. Oh, we've got so much. I love how much opinions we've gotten here. It can be about bullying, I see. There should be consequences for actions, but I worry the idea of canceling someone comes too quick. Yes, because it's just so easy, and an easy result. Hey, let's just cancel them, and we don't have to take the hard work of, talking to this person or having a difficult conversation, for sure. Let's see. And then we'll go with this last one because it's pretty in depth. We'll go, canceling is a sliding scale, in my opinion. Some things need to come to light and have the consequences they deserve, but others are getting canceled for things that are acceptable at the time or the act or action, but aren't now. And the people aren't given a chance to show they have changed. I think that y'all all have just really hit on exactly what we are trying to get at in this presentation, especially that last one that I just read. And there are some that put it very simply, it depends on the circumstance. Jonathan, if you'll go to the next slide. So it's all about really finding the difference in these circumstances, because there should be the opportunity to learn and to grow. And there's a difference between someone saying something 10 years ago and they can learn from it, or maybe they already have learned from it, and then actually consequences for perpetrators. So Jonathan's going to go into an example that you probably all have seen in social media or on the news before.
Sure. So let me talk about my boy, Drew Brees. So back in the summer, he did an interview with the sports radio group, and he made the comment, never agree with anyone disrespecting the flag. Now, let's go back to a year ago when the NFL had those series of protests of people kneeling during the anthem. He kneeled with his teammates. And so for him to come out a year later and say, well, I don't agree with anybody kneeling, his team in the NFL and I don't know, every other black person in New Orleans was like, dude, what? So that's part of their freedom of speech, but also knowing, look who you're with, man. You don't understand the plight of what's going on with why these people are protesting. So it took his team to call him out, but also call him in. And so when they did that, that wasn't only a show to, hey, Drew, understand why we're doing this, but it's also that they value his friendship. They value his relationship. They're not going to go on a Twitter back and forth with him, because what's the point? You're using your energy for the wrong thing. So if this person who you know offline, who is your close friend, you pull them in and hold them accountable by having a conversation. So that's the first example. The second example, R. Kelly. I canceled R. Kelly back in 2007 when I first read about the allegations of his child predatory cases. I knew about Aaliyah back in the late 90s. So I don't believe I could fly anymore was my moniker back in 2007, because all that's happened is that he's still making money and he's still free from all I know. So that's why you started seeing cancel R. Kelly, mute R. Kelly. People want to hurt his pockets because they were tired of seeing him get away with what he's been doing. And so that's the difference between calling someone out and in versus canceling and muting someone.
So all of that said, we're going to go through some advocacy styles. And me and Jonathan both very much love this graphic that we have on here. It's basically talking about this idea of civil discourse. And, you know, we hear a lot, well, why can't we have different opinions but still get along and still talk about it? And that's the difference between the topic as well. You know, we can disagree on our pizza toppings. Like, I like pineapple on my pizza. I'm sure many of you would very much disagree with me, and we can still get along. But when it's something that when it comes to like racism or sexism, that's a whole different story. And it's a lot more difficult in those situations to be civil when you're having those conversations. So we're going to talk about how to be an advocate. And so these different styles of advocacy were developed by Robert J. Nash at the University of Vermont in 2017. And essentially there are 5 different types. The first 4 are ones that we definitely want to stay away from. And then the last one is going to be one that we want to aim for. And so they all have little names that make it very easy to understand what they are. And I really want everybody who's here to be very reflective while I'm going through these types, and just be honest with yourself. When have I been a radvocate, a madvocate, a fadvocate, or a sadvocate? Because we all definitely have. And then try and figure out how we can become that gladvocate. So I'll go through them now. The first one is a radvocate. So these are this is a type of advocacy where you're using extremes. So you're on one of the ends of the ideological continuum, and you think you're correct. You're like, I am coming from this moral high ground. I know it's right. You know, you have no idea. It's that kind of idea behind it. They're very blunt and very radical. And I mean, when you think you're coming from this moral high ground, you're not really open to anyone else's opinions. Next, you have your madvocates, and these people teach through anger and moral outrage. So they use like shock value and really just try to silence other. The problem with this, I mean, besides the fact that it's not a great way to have a conversation, is that most of the time when you're advocating in this way, you're really just calling in people who already agree with your stance. You know, you're not opening it up to anybody else to have a conversation about it, or to, you know, bring them to your side if that's your goal. Next, we have fadvocate. Fadvocates are excited about every new topic that comes up in the news. They post about it immediately on social media. You get really hype about every new issue, but there's not a lot of back behind it. So as soon as it kind of fades out of the news, it becomes something that also fades out of their social media and out of their interest. And so there's a lot of excitement, and passion is great and can inspire other people. But when there's action behind it is when you're really being an advocate. And then last, we have sadvocate. Sadvocates use sad, subjective self-disclosures and stories to portray a certain issue. Now, stories, I'm sure, as many of you know, stories are a great way to employ empathy and get people to understand your point of view. The problem with a sadvocate is not the story so much, but it's making making people into victims and telling a dialogue or telling an experience of someone else and representing it in a way that maybe they wouldn't want to. And so it's all about, we want to make sure we empower people and not make them into victims. So the last one, being a Gladvocate. This is someone who teaches through invitations and through generosity towards others. And the two words that I would use to describe and that Robert J. Nash used to describe Gladvocates was tenuous tenacity. Tenuous tenacity, I mean, if you break down those two words, being tenacious, you have a strong conviction and commitment to your beliefs. You really care about them, you're passionate and you're excited. But then adding that tenuousness in is allowing for you to be, I guess, a little bit bendable in your beliefs, in a sense that you're willing to listen to others and be open to others, and have conversations. I personally believe that it's really great to just reevaluate our beliefs and our values and our thoughts every now and again, to research them, to question them, to be open to different types of conversation about them. Because I think that if you come back around to your belief in the end, you're going to know that you have an even stronger conviction in what you stand behind and what you believe in. So it's all about just making sure that you're standing for something without standing over others. Something that Jonathan has mentioned multiple times is just having that empathy. I think that going into these conversations, if you can think about, oh, what do I believe in? What do I care about? But then also put yourself in someone else's shoes, and think about how you would want to be spoken to in these conversations, you can easily become a Gladvocate. Now, I have a quick caveat for that as well, because I'm sure that we have all felt extreme emotions in these conversations. We should. There is meaning and there is hurt behind social justice issues. And so being blunt, being mad, being sad, being excited, being upset, these are all very valid things to feel. It's all about coming into a conversation without bringing those things into it in a way that stifles someone else's opinion or someone else's beliefs. And so it's okay to feel that way, but remember how to have a productive conversation when you're feeling these emotions. And if you'll just put in the chat again, I'm hoping that you were all reflective. Like I asked, which of these have you seen yourself become before? We've got honestly a little bit of each. All of them, yes, I would have to agree. All of them at one point or another. All of them depending on the day or the topic. That also has a lot to do with it. What are you coming into this conversation with? Have you had a good day? Have you not had a good day? Madvocate and Gladvocate. I love to see a Gladvocate out there. All of them depending on the day. Okay, so also depends on who I'm talking to and my past interactions, probably specifically with that person and maybe the past conversations you've had with them. Maybe you've had a difficult and hard conversation and you came at your madvocacy came out, someone else's madvocacy came out, and it's hard to have that conversation again. And so you have to reframe everything. That can be very difficult. It all depends on the day. Pretty much all of them. So yeah, pretty much across the board, we've probably all been all of them, all of a Radvocate, Madvocate, Sadvocate, and Fadvocate, but we've also probably been a Gladvocate before too. Let's see, current environment is a big influencer on advocacy style. Absolutely, absolutely. Let's see, right now I'm seeing a lot of silence, equals agreement statements on Facebook from my Radvocate friends, but I'm not sure where else they're speaking out. Hopefully they know that Facebook isn't the only place to speak out. There are other ways. I absolutely relate to this. Sometimes you're doing this as a way to not be one of these other styles. I don't want to put it on social media. I know I'll get into a fight on social media. And we're all so in tune to social media right now that it's almost as if when you maybe just have conversations in person with somebody or advocate in a different style, it's not seen. So I absolutely relate to that statement. Jonathan, did you have something to add?
Who, me?
Yes.
I'm just kidding. No, I was just, well, it's a good segue to the next slide, but yeah, I don't want to take away from that. I'm enjoying the conversation, so that's
Me too.
all I wanted to say.
Okay, cool. Let's see. And then we'll go with this one as our last one. Also depends, especially if it directly impacts one or more of my identities and who I'm talking to, or what my objective is. Changing my approach to meet people where they are at, where they're at, depending. Yes, absolutely. I think, like I said, with getting frustrated, getting upset, if it's impacting who you are, one of your identities, or maybe just an identity that you like to advocate for or understand, it can be really difficult to have to be calm in these conversations. So,
Hey,
yes, thank you
Michelle.
everybody for putting those out there.
Hey, Michelle, I was going to say this to bring up the point about silence equals agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So how to be an ally has been a very important conversation, because I could definitely see how, if you're in that position of being a friend of someone who's marginalized, what can you do to show support? Should I post something? Should I tweet something? So I definitely get that awkwardness of not knowing how to respond, but it'll never mean anything if you don't take that energy offline to have that conversation. And so I think that's where the difference is not letting social media networks be the end all be all, not to have that conversation offline. If you just want to send a text and say, hey, I'm here, I don't know how I can support you, but just know I'm here. That's all that really just needs to be said, but it's taking that effort offline. So is it sending a text? Is it sending an email? Is it a conversation to set up a call? That's the intentionality of friendships. That's the foundation of friendships, is what are you willing to do offline to keep that friendship intact?
Absolutely. If you want, you can go to the next slide.
Oh, that's me again. No, I'm kidding. So I wanted to just, I mean, it was another good segue as far as you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep everyone else warm. And what I mean by that is you have to choose your energy for the right things. And when I look back on some of my old posts from 2004 and the notes I posted, I was off the chain. I was just saying anything and everything and about the election back then. And looking back, it's like, what the hell was I thinking? This is stupid. So you have to figure out your energy, but also how to reframe as well. So yeah, social media can be used for good. It can be used as an outlet. You can share newsworthy content, songs, suggestions, anything like that. You can still use that for your creative means, but don't fall for the trap that you're confusing advocacy online for the real work that happens offline. Me Too movement, Black Lives Matter, any other hashtag movement succeeded because they did work offline. So if you're looking for ways on how you can get involved, look up local area resources. Look for your campus student organizations if they need an advisor, or if you just want to come and just see what work they're doing as far as how you can be a support, how you can be an ally. It takes those kind of levels of intentionality, because that is what the real work looks like. It's behind the computer, it's behind the chair, it's getting up and doing the real work. Be careful also that as we get to, well, we're in the election season, that we don't want to fall for spotlighting. And what spotlighting is, I'm going to post this to see how many likes I get. And not from a sense of, I'm going to write something profound, but then we start to get into that trap I said earlier about that digital currency. So if you don't get the number of likes you thought you would get because of this post, do people really like me? Do people really care what I have to say? Did I offend some people? No, people probably don't care what you're saying, but more additionally, if people follow you on Facebook, they're your friend for a reason, and they probably believe what you have to say anyway. So just be careful what you're using your energy for. Are you spotlighting for the cause, or are you spotlighting for likes? So what now? So as I said before, we're in election season, and I'm sure everyone's social media is about to be a Pandora's box for the next 2 or 3 weeks. So what now? So some examples of what the cancel culture, but also how do you have these conversations? Examples, calling in. So what calling in means, speaking to an individual privately about their perceived harmful or problematic actions or opinions. Calling out is when you criticize, excuse me, an individual or organization publicly on social media. Boycotting means, hey, I'm just gonna cancel and not listen to something, but honestly, boycotting or saying I'm gonna stop using Dove soap because I don't like what they do to animals. They don't do that. That was a totally bad example. But that could be an example of boycotting. Yes, you're not buying their product, but that's really not gonna hit their pockets at all. And then there's canceling, a collective attempt at ruining the reputation of someone. So those are the different 4 examples. How to have a productive conversation. So let's say you see a post on social media from Jenny from 3rd grade, who you haven't spoke to in 20 years. Let's say she said something stupid. Is she worth your energy on your need to correct her? No. Does her opinion mean anything to you? No. So again, you have to protect your energy for the right things. So when you actually do see a post for someone, let's say it could be your parent or your aunt, and they may have said something crazy. So you have a phone call and say, hey, Aunt Barbara, I want to have a conversation about something you posted. But before we have that conversation, let's just figure out well, you don't have to say Aunt Barbara, what's the end game? Because she's going to say, well, what do you mean? So before you have that call or that conversation with Aunt Barbara, what is your end point? Do you want her to understand your position, or do you want to further understand her position? And so when you figure that out as far as what your end game is, you're buying into Stephen Covey's habit 5, which is seek first to understand, then be understood. You're not calling on Barbara to be right and to be petty. We're not doing that. So figure out what your end game is with your conversation. Last but not least, when you have these very sensitive conversations, you have to confront the issue and not the person. Because when you confront the issue, that leads into understanding what the perspective is of what constitutes this person's opinion. When you attack the person, that's an easy cop-out, because it shows that when you try to take text talk, Facebook talk, and transmit that into real life offline, it's transference. It doesn't connect. So we have to get back to saving these important conversations in person and not having these conversations offline. And that is the end of our presentation. As Katie said earlier, thank you to our sponsors. Here is our social media handles for Region 4, and we'll leave it open for any questions that people may have. I don't hear any, so I guess we did good. Cool. All right, well.
I'm seeing a question.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, yeah. What was the name of the person who came up with the advocacy styles? And it was Robert J. Nash. Oh, so many thank yous. But I think that might be the only question that we have.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all so much for listening. You are very attentive and engaged the whole time. Thank you so much, and take care.